If you lived in North America between the 1960s and the 1990s, chances are this bus wasn't just something you saw, it was something you heard, felt, and rode. That deep diesel growl. The whine of shifting gears. The curve of glass that made the streets look bigger than they were. It wasn't just a way to get across town, it was part of the town. A moving soundtrack that echoed through downtowns, over bridges, and under tunnels. But for all its presence, its noise, its power, its design, most people never knew the full story. They didn't know how radically engineered it was, or how it dominated entire cities, or how it stubbornly kept running for decades when everything around it changed. This is the untold story of the GM New Look bus, nicknamed the Fishbowl. A machine that redefined mass transit, made engineers rethink everything they knew about bus design, and became one of the most recognizable and misunderstood vehicles in transportation history. What made it so iconic, and why did it disappear? Let's rewind to where it all began. The birth of the Fishbowl, the year was 1959. Post-war optimism was still buzzing through America's veins, and engineering was in a golden age. Cars had fins, rockets were heading to space, and even something as ordinary as a city bus was about to be reimagined. That's when General Motors unveiled a design that looked nothing like the boxy, dull buses people were used to. It was smooth. It was futuristic. It was bold. They called it the GM New Look Transit Bus, but riders had a different name for it. The Fishbowl. One look at that enormous curved windshield, and you'd understand why. The glass wrapped around the front of the bus like a giant observatory dome, giving drivers and passengers a sweeping, panoramic view of the road ahead. But this wasn't just for looks. This was the first sign that GM wasn't just designing another vehicle, they were flipping the entire concept of public transportation on its head. The new look wasn't trying to blend in with city traffic. It was meant to lead it. Sleek, modern, and unlike anything else on the road, it felt more like something out of a sci-fi film than a municipal fleet. But underneath that iconic windshield was something even more revolutionary and far more important. Aircraft engineering meets city streets beneath its futuristic shell. The GM New Look bus was hiding a secret borrowed from the skies. Instead of using the traditional body-on-frame setup, where the body is just bolted onto a heavy-duty truck chassis, GM went with something radical: monocoque construction. It's the same principle used in aircraft, where the body itself carries the structural load. In other words, the skin of the bus was the skeleton. This design made the new look lighter, tougher, and far more durable than anything that came before. It could take the constant stop-and-go abuse of city routes without shaking itself apart. And that wasn't all. GM built it to be modular. Panels along the side, roof, or rear could be removed and replaced without cutting into the frame. For transit agencies, that was a game changer. No more scrapping an entire bus over rust or damage. Just unbolt the problem area, swap it out, and the bus was back on the street. Mechanics loved it. Cities saved money. And commuters never noticed a thing. But GM didn't stop there. They doubled down on futuristic materials. Instead of old-fashioned steel, they used lightweight aluminum and corrosion-resistant fiberglass, materials more at home on airplanes than buses. In cities buried under snow and salt every winter, these materials helped the new look fight back against the rust that ate other buses alive. Lighter body, stronger frame, easier repairs. This wasn't just a redesign, it was a complete reinvention of what a bus could be. And yet, all that clever engineering still hadn't revealed the most unforgettable part of the new look experience: the sound of the city. The Detroit diesel engine. If the Fishbowl looked futuristic on the outside, its heart was pure muscle. Most GM New Look buses came fitted with the legendary Detroit Diesel 6V71, a two-stroke V6 engine originally built for military vehicles and heavy industry. It wasn't just powerful, it was loud and unforgettable. You didn't need to see the bus to know it was coming. That low, throaty growl would echo down the street, growing into a sharp, mechanical whine as it picked up speed. It was the sound of the city, a rolling thunder that bounced between buildings, filled underground bus terminals, and pulsed through busy intersections like a heartbeat. But the sound wasn't just for show. The 6V71 was a two-stroke engine, which meant it fired every time the crankshaft rotated. That gave it an aggressive torque curve, perfect for stop-and-go city traffic. GM paired it with a root-style blower, a kind of built-in supercharger that rammed air into the cylinders to boost performance even further. The result? A powertrain that could haul a full load of passengers through the toughest routes, in any weather, without breaking a sweat. Transit agencies loved it. It was reliable. It was simple. And best of all, parts were everywhere. If a 6V71 needed work, a city's maintenance crew could tear it down and rebuild it without blinking. Backing it all up was the Allison V-Drive automatic transmission, a compact, heavy-duty gearbox that gave smooth, predictable shifts. Whether it was crawling through Manhattan traffic, climbing the brutal hills of San Francisco, or gliding over icy Toronto boulevards, the new look's drivetrain handled it with ease. The engine didn't just move the bus. It defined it, and cities couldn't get enough. Dominating North America by the early 1960s, transit agencies had seen enough. The GM new look wasn't just a better bus, it was a revolution on wheels. And they wanted in. From the largest metropolises to the smallest towns, cities lined up to place their orders. What followed was a production run that would cement the Fishbowl as the most iconic city bus in North American history. Between 1959 and 1986, General Motors produced more than 44,000 new-look buses, an astonishing number for a transit vehicle. They became a staple of urban life. If you lived in New York, Chicago, Montreal, Los Angeles, or Toronto during those decades, chances are you saw fleets of them rolling down the streets in long lines, uniform in color, shape, and sound. In Toronto, the Transit Commission held on to the new look well into the 2000s, long after newer models were available.
Why?
Because they were tough, dependable, and easy to refurbish. And it wasn't just Canada and the US. Some models were exported to Mexico and even parts of South America. There were electric trolleybus variants too, powered by overhead wires, used in cities like Vancouver and Edmonton. GM didn't stop at just one size either. There were shorter 35-foot suburban versions for smaller routes and massive 60-foot articulated models for busy corridors. Each one could be tailored to the city's unique needs, from cold winters to tight downtown corners. The Fishbowl didn't just show up, it took over. In an era before standardized transit systems, this bus became the standard. It was the face of public transportation for a generation. But like any great machine, it wasn't without its flaws. Flaws under the surface for all its innovation, the GM new look wasn't perfect. Beneath its sleek design and engineering brilliance were real issues, some frustrating, some costly, and all too familiar to the people who worked with these buses every day. Let's start with the drivers. Early models of the new look had no power steering. That meant wrestling with a massive steering wheel, turning huge front wheels with nothing but raw upper body strength. Navigating narrow city corners or pulling into tight stops wasn't just hard, it was exhausting. After a full shift, many drivers walked away sore, stiff, and frustrated. Power-assisted steering did come later, but for years, this was a daily struggle. Then there was the iconic Fishbowl windshield. It looked amazing. That sweeping curve of glass gave the bus its unforgettable profile. But maintaining it? A nightmare. The windshield was made from 6 separate curved panes. That meant more points to clean, more seams to leak, and more glass to replace when something cracked. Sun glare during sunrise and sunset could be brutal, and depending on the angle of the light, visibility sometimes got distorted, making the ride less safe, not more stylish. And while GM had used aluminum and fiberglass to fight corrosion, rust still found a way in. The steel frame underneath wasn't invincible. In snowy, salty cities, moisture would creep into seams, collect between panels, and slowly eat away at the structure from the inside. Maintenance shops became experts at patching, repainting, and sometimes rebuilding entire sections just to keep the buses roadworthy. These flaws didn't stop the new look from dominating, but they did chip away at its perfect image. And as time went on, another problem became harder to ignore: comfort. Aging comfort in a modern world as cities grew and expectations changed the Fishbowl began to feel dated. What once seemed like a futuristic marvel was now starting to fall short, especially when it came to comfort. Air conditioning? Not in most models. Riders relied on sliding windows and roof vents to fight off the summer heat. On hot, humid days, that meant sticky seats, stifling air, and the kind of sweat-soaked commutes that made people dread their daily ride. There were attempts to retrofit air conditioning into some fleets, but the results were inconsistent, and for the majority of passengers, it was just something they had to endure. And then there was the noise. That mighty Detroit diesel engine, the one that gave the new look its muscle and signature sound, was great for performance, but not so great for the human ear. If you had the misfortune of sitting near the rear, directly above the engine, you weren't having a conversation. You were shouting over a deafening mechanical roar. Even then, half the time the person next to you couldn't hear a word. Still, despite all that, the new look refused to quit. Transit agencies didn't just run them into the ground. They brought them back from the edge. Buses got new engines, new transmissions, new seats, and fresh paint. Some were rebuilt multiple times over their service life.
Why?
Because even with its flaws, the core structure of the Fishbowl was that solid. Rebuilding was cheaper than replacing. And in a world of tight budgets, that kind of reliability was gold. But by the late 1980s, no amount of rebuilding could hide the truth. The world was changing, and the Fishbowl couldn't keep up forever. End of the line, but not forgotten by the mid-1980s. The writing was on the wall. Cities were evolving. Urban design had shifted, and the needs of passengers had changed with it. Accessibility became a priority. Riders wanted low floors for wheelchairs and strollers, quieter engines, smoother rides, and modern features that the Fishbowl simply wasn't built to offer. Transit agencies were under pressure to modernize, and GM knew it. After nearly 3 decades in production, the company officially ended the New Look line in 1986. No farewell tour. No dramatic send-off. Just a quiet end to one of the most successful and iconic transit vehicles in North American history. But even after production stopped, the Fishbowl lived on. Some cities kept them in service into the early 2000s. Others restored them as historic fleet vehicles. Transit fans, mechanics, and urban nostalgia lovers continue to admire the new look for what it was, a durable, brilliantly engineered workhorse that helped shape the rhythm of daily life for millions. It was loud. It was imperfect. It was overbuilt and unforgettable. And if you ever rode one, even once, chances are you still remember the sound it made as it pulled away from the curb. The GM New Look wasn't just a bus. It was an era on wheels.